As 2020 is coming to a close, what risks and opportunities await us in 2021? Probably the two most eye-popping yet fundamentally different examples this year of risk and opportunity have been Tesla and Bitcoin. The question is whether investors should be buying the hype. Hi there, I'm Kent Kramer, Chief Investment Officer at Foster Group. And for the next few minutes, I'll be sharing some of our financial perspectives on the economic environment and financial markets for the 2 weeks ended Friday, December 18th, as well as explaining a little bit about how Bitcoin has become maybe one of the top investment stories of late 2020. The daily news has been a mix of vaccine approval, vaccination plans, and speculation about how long before the health situation permanently changes, the direction of things, and the economy fully opens back up. Stock markets seem to be anticipating very good things as they reach new highs in the US, even as COVID-related cases and deaths continue to set records as well. Just 2 weeks ago, Pfizer and Moderna were announcing the surprisingly positive results of their vaccine trials and submitting them for approval to the FDA and other pharmaceutical regulators around the world. While we remain excited about Pfizer and Moderna crossing the finish line, there are even more developments in process, making the future of diversified platforms to develop vaccines for other kinds of viruses that come up very real. The mRNA breakthroughs, as they're called, have really been game changers. And you can see on this graphic from the New York Times how many vaccines are still in various stages of development. It's going to provide a very diversified portfolio of ways to fight not only COVID-19, but other viruses in the future. The vaccine rollout has been maybe just a little bit slower than some that hoped initially. On the left, you can see, though, that state by state numbers are just starting to register in terms of percentage of population being vaccinated. Obviously, the need for massive distribution for health and the economy is clear as case counts and hospitalizations continue to come in at very high levels. You can see those in the charts on the right. There's no lack of need for what these vaccines are promising to deliver. In terms of how the economy is doing, overall employment trends remain positive with continuing claims declining, the national unemployment rate continuing to fall, though both are improving at a slower rate as the virus begins to affect different states differently at the end of the year here. California, New York, New Jersey are seeing increasing trends in terms of infections, and they're instituting different kinds of lockdowns to slow things down. So that we're seeing that in Europe as well. Those restrictions lead to at least temporary job losses. In some cases, they seem to be more permanent kinds of losses. The last two readings on initial unemployment claims have shown an uptick. This is certainly associated with the resurgence of the virus and the subsequent pockets of those economic slowdowns. Markets, though, have continued to be optimistic as they look ahead into 2021, even in the midst of the virus numbers. The past 2 weeks have seen the continued larger gains in small company stocks and companies outside the US, small companies represented by that orange line, the light blue line, companies outside the United States. For the quarter, a similar picture plays out. Some refer to small companies as pro-cyclical stocks, since they tend to do well at the beginning of new growth cycles in the economy. And while virus slowdowns are not over, there's an increasing sense of light at the end of the tunnel, and the prospects for strong economic growth in 21 are starting to accelerate. First Trust economist Brian Westbury noted this week that, quote, back in June, the Fed outlook forecast the US economy would see a decline of 6.5% in real GDP in 2020. Now they are targeting a decline of just 2.4%. GDP estimates for 2021 were up to 4.2%. The year-end unemployment rate was projected at 9.3% back in June, but is now seen at 6.7%. Unemployment is now forecasted to fall to 5% in 2021 and to move below 4% in 2023. Good news. Perhaps you've been hearing or reading about Bitcoin recently. This unusual asset has seen some amazing ups and downs since its creation or inception in 2009. In 2020, the price of one Bitcoin has risen from $7,189 to over $23,000. That's a 229% increase in just under 12 months. In the past 3 months, Bitcoin has climbed 113%. Now compare this to Tesla, which has also had an astounding 2020, up over 600% this year alone. But Tesla's only up 49% in the last 3 months. If we look at a longer period of time, 5-year basis, Bitcoin is up over 5,000%, while Tesla, again, is only up 1,300%. Like the interest in Tesla, lots of people are asking, should I be invested in Bitcoin? So first, in kind of any investment that we're going to think about, we want to understand what it is. Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. It is a digital asset, not a physical asset. That makes it a little bit different from gold or other kinds of currency. There's no Bitcoin company out there or traditional issuer like a US Treasury or a European Financial Committee or anything like that. It's issued by a computer algorithm. You buy it and sell it at a cryptocurrency exchange, and you hold kind of the record of your ownership in a digital wallet that has a digital key or password that allows you to access and use the Bitcoin that you own. Now, Bitcoin was originally created via a computer algorithm and was released by an unknown person, kind of pseudonymically known as Satoshi Nakamoto. This happened in 2009. No one knows who that person is. They've never identified themselves publicly, and no one has identified them to date. Now, that original algorithm that this unknown person wrote sits on something called the blockchain, which is a kind of a huge interspersed computer network around the globe. And that algorithm, as it runs, it first sees a total number of Bitcoins created at peaking at approximately 21 million. So there's somewhat of a fixed supply of Bitcoin right around that 21 million mark. So where are we in terms of the creation of Bitcoin and kind of what's left to happen? If you look at this simple graphic, it shows you kind of a picture of, again, at the top, there's going to be 21 million Bitcoins that ultimately will exist. Currently, there's been about 18.5 million of those Bitcoins have been created or mined by people who are participating in this big project on their Bitcoin blockchain. That means there's about 2.5 million left to discover. The remaining Bitcoins are scheduled to be released or mined between now and 2140. So you can see we've made a lot of progress in terms of how much Bitcoin is currently out there. But I want you to look at the bottom of the chart in particular. 20% of Bitcoin may have been lost forever. If you do a search, a Google search for lost Bitcoin stories, you'll come across literally hundreds of stories of people who have either had computer crashes, hard drive problems, losing their key, their digital key, which is the password to recover or use their Bitcoin that they own in their digital wallet. There have been just kind of tragic stories of people losing what would now be worth millions of dollars, some early adopters of Bitcoin when it was relatively inexpensive. But through some problem, through some technology problem, their access to their coins has been lost and likely permanently. So why buy Bitcoin? What, other than it's exciting, what's the kind of the argument behind it? Well, many people have compared Bitcoin to gold, something like a commodity that can be converted back to fiat currency or currency issued by governments, and it's supported by governments. Because of the limited supply of Bitcoin, though, if adoption for payment increases and the demand to use it, if the adoption for payment increases and the demand continues to increase as a result, the price could rise. It's also been called a retail inflation hedge, a risk-on asset that kind of anticipates a global boom and subsequent inflation, which would cause the value of Bitcoin maybe to be worth more as dollars are worth less. Some think that governments are printing so much money to prop up their economies that it's ultimately going to devalue those fiat currencies like dollars and euros and yen, causing digital currencies or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to be worth even more. You can transact with Bitcoin a little more easily today, though still not as simply as with regular currency. PayPal recently began facilitating transactions in Bitcoin. The issue for transactional currency is how steady is the value, right? It's hard to price something in Bitcoin if the value of the currency itself can move so much from day to day. If you're not able to do all of your transactions in Bitcoin, there's a very real exchange rate risk. So what are some of those risks? Well, we've talked about a couple. One, because Bitcoin is not currently regulated or issued by any governments around the world, governments have talked about how are they going to regulate Bitcoin going forward. And every time a government makes kind of a statement or puts out some kind of public comment about how they might regulate Bitcoin going forward, you see potential drops in the price of Bitcoin because people worry about government stepping in and creating too much regulation and causing the value of Bitcoin to go down. Governments are still just undecided in terms of how they're going to regulate this new phenomenon. I mean, it's relatively new, just since 2009. Just over 10 years old, has far less in general use. There have been some really digital security issues as well. If you look here, you'll see Silk Road and Mt. Gox. Silk Road was a place on the internet, one of those blockchain nodes where lots of criminal elements were storing Bitcoin because it could stay outside of traditional law enforcement agencies. Ultimately, Silk Road was shut down by US law enforcement agencies because of the number or the amount of money that was being held there in Bitcoin format by illegal entities and people who had attained the assets by criminal activity. In a different way, Mt. Gox was a huge node, a storage site on the blockchain for Bitcoin. It was hacked. And in the process of that hack, over 850,000 Bitcoins were ultimately stolen and or lost. Very few of them have been recovered to date. There's lots of divergent opinions with Bitcoin as to whether or not we're in a massive bubble or whether there's a lot of room left to run. Again, it's new, it's kind of uncharted territory. It's currently classified as an asset by the IRS. This doesn't sound like much, but if you transact in Bitcoin, let's say you're going to buy a pizza or you're going to rent an Airbnb, when you use Bitcoin to pay the owner of the Airbnb, you're using Bitcoin that was acquired at one price, and you used it maybe when Bitcoin was at another price. The difference in the acquisition price of the Bitcoin and the same price of the Bitcoin that you used that day to pay the Airbnb, if there's a difference in the Bitcoin price, it's actually a capital transaction, and you could owe a capital gain just by using your Bitcoin to facilitate a transaction. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it can be lost permanently if the digital key is misplaced or lost due to a hard drive crash or just simply misplaced because you can't remember what it was. Now, Bitcoin is not yet available either directly through your brokerage or bank, and it's not available in an ETF or mutual fund structure. So if you want to own it directly, you have to go to a cryptocurrency exchange. If you do want to own something like it or a proxy for it in a brokerage or bank account, you have to buy a trust like the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the Bitwise 10 Crypto Index. If we look at this as a crypto exchange or a cryptocurrency exchange, you see Coinbase is a very large one, considering going public in 2021, and Gemini is another. You'll see a variety of digital currencies are listed there and the current price. In both of these cases, you can actually link it to your bank account and send dollars, which can then be used to buy Bitcoin, or you can even use credit cards. If you use a credit card, the transaction cost for buying the Bitcoin goes up. Grayscale and Bitwise, those are trusts that own digital currencies, and they trade over the counter. So shares of these trusts can be held in a brokerage account or in some kinds of bank trust account. Problem with these two ways to own Bitcoin is they trade at very high premiums to the underlying value of their holdings. Grayscale last week was trading at a 30% premium to the underlying value of the Bitcoin that they hold. So for every dollar of Bitcoin held, the buyer of Grayscale was paying $1.30, so a 30% premium per dollar of Bitcoin value that you purchased. That sounds bad, but if we look at the Bitwise 10 Crypto Index Fund, this is a chart that I pulled down this morning. The market price today, early in the day, was $84 to buy this index fund, which is not really a mutual fund or exchange traded fund, the way we're used to hearing that word used. But the underlying NAV, the value of the cryptocurrency in the fund this morning, though you're paying $84, you're getting less than $20 worth of value, $19.68. Again, that's a big premium. So the words here are buyer beware. Warren Buffett has said a lot of helpful common sense things about investing, and I enjoy his quotes. I think this one about excitement and expenses as enemies may be very applicable to Bitcoin. Another one that comes to mind is not to invest in a business or anything else you don't fundamentally understand. And Bitcoin can be a fairly complex thing to understand, both in how it operates and what its future prospects are. There's a lot of things happening with Bitcoin today that create excitement and unfortunately are pretty expensive. This is our last financial perspectives of the COVID-19 year, and every year I reread and rewatch Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. By the way, I like the Patrick Stewart Scrooge the best. My hope is that it will help me be a little less like the pre-Christmas Scrooge by reading and watching. And I thought this quote was exactly the one we needed with the worry about contagious viruses. There is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. Perhaps we can add some positive contagion to our friends and family this season. I hope you can find reasons to laugh and share good humor this holiday time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in 2021.